This is DUNE TALK, a DUNENewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey everyone, welcome. Know that we're in the year 2025, and this is the official show of DUNENewsNet.com. Last year was truly the year of Dune, starting with the spring release of Dune Part 2 movie and concluding with the premiere of HBO's Dune Prophecy, streaming now on Max. Now on Dune Talk, we're doing our overall review of the TV show's first season. This is Marcus, your friendly editor at DUNENewsNet.com. It's been a while since we've last recorded, and I can't wait to explore Dune Prophecy with the rest of the crew.
Hi, it's Mark from Dune Info here. Great to be back. Happy New Year to everyone. 2024 was a great year with the 40th anniversary of Lynch's Dune, the Dune Part 2 and the Prophecy, and I'm excited for this new year to explore everything Dune.
Hey everyone, I'm Rachel, Dune mega fan, and I'm wearing my Sisterhood black today, and I can't wait to talk about Dune Prophecy with everybody.
Hey, Simon here. I can't believe it's been close to a year since Part 2 came out. It's been an amazing year last year, and I think this year we're going to get even more amazing with more Dune news. And I'm wearing my red Harkonnen. I don't know.
And together with the Dune Talk regulars, we have Dr. Kara Kennedy joining back as our special guest today. Her third book about Dune, Adaptations of Dune, was published last year before the movie came out. And during the Dune Prophecy run, she wrote weekly episode reviews on the site that you might have seen. Kara, glad you're joining us.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be back. Definitely last year was a lot of Dune for everyone, including me, and I've been on a little break, but I'm really excited that we're getting a TV series that we're going to dive into today.
Dune TV News.
On November 17, 2024, it finally became a reality, a new Dune TV show that began streaming on Max, telling an original story across 6 weeks. So first of all, let's hear everyone's reactions to experiencing the show as it aired. Kara, would you like to start us off?
I'll admit that I wasn't sure how the TV show was going to go, how similar it was going to be to the movies, what they were going to base the material off of, but I have to say I was pleasantly surprised. I actually enjoyed most of the show, and I really liked seeing a whole show focused on the sisterhood and focused on women and seeing some of the origins of Bene Gesserit abilities and getting more time for character development and more of a Game of Thrones style chance to go into the political intrigue, which is a big part of Dune. So I am really looking forward to seeing more of this part of the universe outside of Frank Herbert's original story.
I was a little bit worried about Dune Prophecy. It's been 5 years in the making. There's been all sorts of issues and replacement directors and cast and showrunners. But I was excited to see it finally on the screen, and I have some issues with it. But overall, it was very exciting to see another aspect of the Dune universe on the screen for the first time.
I, like Mark said, I was really kind of cautiously optimistic because it had been in production for so long. So, you never know if it's going to be everything that you wanted. But I overall really enjoyed it and found myself getting kind of like worked up while I was watching things and like getting theories and trying to take notes while I was watching. So that was really exciting as a book fan to see how much they put in there for readers.
I'm going to be like Mark and Rachel, very nervous at first. After the second episode, I was like, this is really happening. We're really getting a Dune TV show. I think the first episode, which I know was longer than the first, the other episodes, was kind of like, oh, wow, this is actually happening. And, I came back every week, Sunday nights, open up my Max app. My wife, who is probably sick of hearing about Paul and Duncan and Gurney, actually loved this. She was so intrigued by finding out more about the sisterhood, and so was I. And it's great that it wasn't such fan service, but yet there was a little bit of fan service, and I'll get into that as I talk about it. But overall, it was good.
Yeah, I think I said before, I was just so excited about the idea that we're going to have an original Dune story on screen, because of course we have the movies and it's great. Love both the movies, but actually having a story that we haven't experienced before in book form, something completely new on the screen that people are experiencing week by week. That's really exciting. So it's nice to see all the chatter online and the discussions and different viewpoints. We really enjoyed the experience of having a Dune TV series airing on Max. So yeah, I think one of the things that stood out even back from the trailers is how Prophecy is basically connecting itself to the movies, both in visual style and other aspects. Rachel, what were your thoughts on that?
I thought they did a really great job of that. It didn't look like a show that was shot entirely inside like a little soundstage. They used CGI and in a way that made things feel expansive. We got all those wonderful shots of the highliners. So it felt connected to the like more like those gigantic IMAX worthy visuals of the film, but for the small screen. So we got all the textural backgrounds and the beautiful costuming. So it did feel expensive in that way, which I was impressed by.
I agree with Rachel. It did feel very much like one of the Denis Villeneuve films production-wise. One thing I was always so afraid of when they said, hey, Dune TV show, that they were really going to cut the budget and it was going to look like, I don't know, like one of the new Star Wars shows. Honestly, if you would have told me this was the theater at one point, I would have believed it. There's stuff I've seen in the theaters that doesn't even look that good. And you're right, the costumes, amazing.
They were so textured, which is something that is like sometimes missing from television, like even if they were, look, a lot of characters are wearing black or brown, but they did so much layering. And obviously it was a fantastic cast, which I think elevated it beyond anything we could have hoped for. But I think that costuming and sets are really, really important. And sometimes people don't appreciate them unless they're bad and they notice the lack of it. So I wanted to bring up how wonderful I thought the costuming was.
Does anyone know what the average budget of an episode was?
I'm not sure, but I'd look at the Hungarian tax credits that they got for that. And so I think it was 80 million that they spent in Hungary, plus any visual effects outside of Hungary. So it was an expensive show, certainly. They weren't cutting corners on it. But from my point of view, it looked amazing. It looked great. The criticism that I've seen online is that it looked perhaps a little bit too like the movies. If this was taking place, 1,000 years before or something like that, that would be one thing. But there's a 10,000-year time jump between them. And stagnation is a theme of the Dune series, certainly. But it almost felt like there wasn't any design evolution in that 10,000 years. And that would be one of my criticisms of it. Whether or not that was one of the changes that they made as part of the reshuffling during production, I'm not sure. I would have liked to have seen it a little bit more distinct, I guess, and not so reliant on the Denis Villeneuve design aesthetics. But I completely understand why they went with that, because it's a Dune show. They want people to associate it with Dune. It's just the time frame within the universe. It just feels too similar in my.
I mean, they definitely kept that color palette, right? Like they really like leaned into it. Did feel very on brand, almost as if maybe they like pulled concept art that they had developed for the films and just kind of like reused it for the smaller screen. I feel like they were doing a little bit of difference with the way that the clothes were made, because I feel like in the film there wasn't as much texture as there was in the show, but yeah, I feel like they were trying to like create layers, like more opulent fabric choices, even for like these poorer houses. Whereas like in the future, everything got very flat in terms of texture. Like it would be shiny or it would be matte or it would be soft, but there wasn't a lot of fabric manipulation. I say that, I know that they did that, but I think the overall effect for me on the small screen was because maybe the cameras were closer. I feel like people had more fabric manipulation on each of their individual costumes than like an overall, like family to family.
Mark, you would be the one that would know this better than anyone. Are they planning to make an art of the first season book?
I'm hopeful, but I've not seen any news or rumors about that. But I know that I think Insight Editions, who did the movie Dune art and solo books, I think they've done ones for Game of Thrones and those sorts of series. So hopefully.
I have all the Game of Thrones costuming books. They're wonderful. So that
Oh.
would be amazing if they did something to that level.
Yeah, I know like Disney was doing them for their shows for a while, like the Mandalorians. I have those. So hopefully we'll get an art of I keep wanting to call it the Sisterhood still. Even prophecy.
Yeah, I mean, there are some concept art and stuff online on Instagram and stuff. Some of the artists are starting to post their design concepts and stuff like that. So if we don't get a book, then hopefully we'll get more from the individual artists.
Yeah, so moving on to some of the highlights from the show. So, Mark, obviously the show definitely revolved around Valia and Tula. Like they were central both in the present day and the flashbacks. What's your impression of the portrayal of the Harkonnen sisters?
For me, I think that was one of the highlights. Some fantastic actresses, in both time frames of that. Also, Jessica Bardem is from Northallerton, which is North Yorkshire, so just up the road from here. So she's a local lass. So I was very happy to hear a Yorkshire accent behind the scenes interviews. But just their relationship and how that evolved, and how Tula, you get the impression at first she's quite a soft character, but as you learn more about her, she actually becomes as hard, if not more ruthless than her sister. So I'm interested to see how their relationship evolves in the future, and whether or not we continue to get the younger versions of the sisters in any future seasons.
And speaking of Tula, we got to see a lot of the mother-son relationship aspect in this series between Tula and Desmond. Kara, what did you think about that relationship and any connections with existing Dune lore?
I noticed when we had that reveal that felt to me like a mirroring of Paul and Jessica from the original story, although of course it was much more of a distant relationship and a lot more problematic. Tula clearly is concerned and cares about this child she's had, and she cares for him so much that she, gives him away essentially. And I saw similarities with this kind of idea of wanting him to be special, wanting him to go on to great things, which Jessica also has that for Paul. And then we have the whole prophecy and prediction aspect of the show relating to the genetic bloodlines. And so we see this idea of something with the Atreides and the Harkonnen being especially powerful and kind of mysterious and special. But unlike Jessica, she didn't want him to be raised in the Sisterhood's ways. She wanted him to be free from that kind of controlling aspect. And she did know who his father was, unlike Jessica in the original series. So I liked having some similarities with the original book, but then also some deviations and kind of a way to compare and contrast those mother-son relationships. But I think having a mother-son relationship be core to the story is something that I really appreciate about the original. So I'm really glad that they found a way to work it into the show.
I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of dumbfounded when we found out that Desmond was her son. And then I was like, wait, we got a whole good 20-30 minutes in just one episode of a flashback of her falling in love with an Atreides. And I was like, it makes perfect sense. I was just like, oh, Simon, you're an idiot right now. But it worked. But I agree with you. It was kind of, she wanted him to be special, but not like Sisterhood special, kind of like grow up, become your own person. And eventually maybe you do find out that you're a Harkonnen / Atreides.
Certainly it speaks to Tula maybe not being as indoctrinated into the Sisterhood's ideology as much as Jessica was, right? That she felt that there was another path for him.
In the same way, Jessica disobeyed the Sisterhood completely and had a son instead of a daughter. So in both cases, they've gone against
against the grain.
That was definitely a theme that we saw throughout the series with various characters about their loyalty to the Sisterhood and split loyalties with something else. We saw that with Francesca as well in the later episodes.
Because this is the start of the Sisterhood, it's unclear really just how strong that indoctrination is, though, because it looked like many of these characters are fairly late into their development into the Sisterhood, and quite how strong that indoctrination or brainwashing or whatever.
Yeah, maybe for Tula, it's been a lot of negatives. right? Like she doesn't really have any paths at this point because Valia slammed all those doors for her, right? So yeah, I don't know. At least looking ahead, I would expect that maybe Tula is kind of a wild card.
So I have a question for you guys. I mean, we can bring it up later if you want. Do you think there's going to be different sect of the sisterhoods, like people that follow Tula, people that follow, I forgot the old Reverend Mother way, but kind of like different sections of the sis. Yeah, kind of like if you bring it up in like Harry Potter terms, that way, kind of like maybe 3 different houses of the sisterhood, and eventually maybe something happens. I mean, we got a good way that 1,000 years before Paul, something that brings back the sisterhoods all together.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that I've got on my scorecard to talk about for season 2 is that we have that fracture in the sisterhood. You've got Sister Dorothea's followers in control of Warlock 9 now, effectively. Not very many of them, though, the Sword Master or 2 would make sure it worked to me.
They're just not delivering their groceries.
What you do is you have a great wooden sandworm that you deliver to the gates of the sisterhood.
I mean, I very much enjoyed that we're grounded in the point of view of the sisterhood, even if we're looking at like the different sides of it, because rooting for the villains is almost like a Dune kind of tradition, right? Like you want these characters to succeed, but when you look at them objectively, they're just all bad people. And I love that. I love that.
What are you talking about? Paul's a sweet little innocent teenage boy that just wants revenge for killing his father.
Yes. And
it's like that, that video. He's a good guy. He didn't do anything.
Yeah. What murder?
What murders?
Yeah, no, but I love that, right? Because we see that parallel. That's again a connection to the original story for me. Is that like the plans within plans type of plotting? That you see the way that they've layered the show, and even in the editing of like the past and the present kind of together gives it that complexity that feels like Dune. But it's also just those the tropes that we expect, right? Like charismatic leaders that are dangerous, that believe in themselves, that seem immune to criticism, that cannot be swayed, that think they know best. And I mean, they only know what they know, right? And we obviously know a lot more than they do because we have 10,000 years of history at our, in these books that we've read. But I don't know. I just loved it. I love getting down into the muck and seeing them mess up and seeing how they created all these problems for themselves. It just feels very true to the series itself.
Well, that's one thing I think about Dune characters, all of them, even the ones that we're familiar with, and especially these, they will mess up. They're not perfect beings. They have flaws. Like when, the reveal of Desmond and telling, his new party in a way, if you want to go like political, maybe he creates a house that we don't know about that disappears eventually. But when he's like, take her away, speaking of his mother, I was like, you are Harkonnen, aren't you? Like I had so much hope for you. But Desmond, in a way, became a charismatic leader, training these Sardaukar beta versions, as I like to call them. But it was kind of, he became no one and like started raising his own, fame. So it's there. They're all, like you said, Rachel, everyone in Dune is a villain. There's no one that's perfectly innocent.
Yeah.
They all turn at one point.
Some of them are more cartoonish than others, right? But at least in Dune Prophecy, it feels like everyone is operating from a point of view where they think they're doing the right thing, right? Even in their vengeance mode, which is based on a problem that they don't actually understand, that is full of misinformation. They're between House Harkonnen and House Atreides. Like they still think they're doing the right thing. They're honoring their house. They're avenging their dead brother or whatever they're doing. They're trying to stabilize the empire, or they're being loyal to their, to the sisterhood or whatever. It's like they're starting from that place, but they're all just They don't know what they don't know. And even the characters that know the future interpret it incorrectly. And it's delicious to watch.
The whole idea of having these morally gray characters, that's not something new, because we've had Game of Thrones and we've had a lot of shows with anti-hero, with villains, and yeah, it's not necessarily that it's not necessarily to have that hero on screen, but I think it's really offering us a different perspective, right? We know that they believe that they're doing what's in the best interest of themselves or their house. But it's really giving us as the viewer the opportunity to experience completely different perspectives, and like the original warning from Dune against charismatic leaders, and to be careful what's in front of you, like to think for yourself. So I thought it was good. I didn't feel it was like a miss in any way. That some people said that they didn't feel they had anybody to root for, but I think that's the idea.
Oh no, I felt like Valia was correct a lot of the time. Like, yeah, Valia, do it. Tell them all to knife themselves. And I'm like, wait, you don't have it.
No, it was awesome. Don't lie.
Yes. What do we say? We support women's wrongs.
I really like that they gave the characters that development and layering, because there's other franchises that are a lot more black and white. Like, this is a good character, and even if they have some stumbles, like overall they're pretty morally good most of the time. And I think getting the backstory of the sisters really helped us see like the amount of pain and trauma that Valia and Tula are carrying around with them, helped inform who they are as adults, rather than just having them be easily put into a box like, oh, that's the stern Reverend Mother type kind of person. Valia to me seemed like she was going to a lot of effort to mask these things, these burden that she was carrying around with her. And then especially by the end, we get to see actually how big that burden was. It wasn't just like one person, right? It was like a whole people that she was having to sacrifice. And so I really like that they went to that effort to make the characters layered, and so they don't just seem, to easily fit in a box.
And that's something I was afraid of, that they weren't going to do that. I thought right away we were just going to have these characters that we didn't see their growth, where they would end up. And I love the flashbacks. I know some people were like, the flashbacks were just a waste of time and all that. I'm like, no, you gotta have the flashbacks to understand where these sisters come from, and understand their, I hate saying, but in a way, their trauma bond because of all the stuff they've gone through in the past.
Yeah, and the choice to interweave the stories rather than just spend 2 episodes on like the younger versions and then have them grow up, I think was really smart, because it helps us watch in parallel all these decisions that were informed by these, their prior lives. So yeah, I really enjoyed that part, and also makes it very fun to watch a second time. So if anyone hasn't done that, you should watch it all a second time, because it's all there.
I enjoyed the flashbacks as well, but and they are sort of crucial to the story, that you get information revealed in chunks.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the distribution of those was how I prefer it. I think it was episode 3, which was almost all flashback, which I enjoyed, but I know that other people, I think, Corey, you were one of them, that didn't like that episode as much.
Well, I like the flashbacks, but to me, episode 3 just stalled the pace of the whole show. It just like came to a dead stop, and then we're like, I would have rather had them more integrated in,
Yeah.
because I like the flashbacks, but I found that episode quite slow. And it was like, I want to get back to the characters that you've been telling me about, right? Like, I know they're the same people, but I want to see like adult Volley, not a whole episode of, let's go back to the history here.
Yeah, perhaps this is somewhere where, if it was an 8-episode or 10-episode show, they could have distributed those flashbacks a little bit more evenly and spread them out a little bit more, perhaps. I don't know. Yeah, the flashbacks I certainly enjoyed, and is something I'm curious to see how they're approaching season 2.
I think 10 episodes, I think, would have been ideal. It did feel as if they were cramming a lot in, and I am very interested in how people who have no knowledge, like who've only ever watched the films, how they experienced this. Because for me, there was so much in there that was, I guess, as you said, like maybe fan service a little bit, that kept me engaged. But I wonder if you didn't know what you were looking at, or you didn't understand the significance of like that house being mentioned or that location being shown, if it would have worked as well. Yeah.
I agree with you, Rachel. There is some stuff that's fan service, like when they said, my favorite Ixian, like I put my hand up in the air. I was like, yeah. And my wife just looked at me like, okay, he's crazy again. I'm sure it has to do something with the later stuff. But I think it was 6 episodes, right? If I don't remember.
Yeah.
HBO has a hard time committing to 10 episodes on any of their shows. And it could just be a budget reason also. I know the last episode was a little bit longer. It was like almost an hour and a half or something like that. But before that aired, I remember telling my wife, I was like, they have a lot to explain in not that much time. And when we were done, she's like, that's it? I'm like, yep, 6 episodes. But it could be HBO wanting us to have like an appetite for season 2 and be so excited about it. Or it could just literally be a budget thing, like, hey, we don't know how this show's going to do, but next season we might give you a little bit more money to play with, and we might extend it to like 9 episodes or 10. I think there was a lot of, is this show going to work before, because it was in production hell for such a long time, and are people even interested in it? And you're right. I wonder how many people tuned into it that weren't diehard Dune fans.
Mm-hmm. It did feel like that, especially that last episode. I felt like if they reshot or re-storyboarded anything, it was the last episode. That's, because it just felt like there was a lot of concepts that got collapsed, like motivations that kind of never were revealed. And maybe that's a season 2 thing. But yeah, I felt like I wanted more time for some of these things to be fleshed out and explained. Not ad nauseum. I know that it's a great thing in Dune that we don't know exactly how everything works. But I do want to know why a character is acting the way that they are. And I think some of these secondary characters were not given as much motivation as I would expect for the amount of risk that they had put themselves in.
And also in the last episode as well, Constantine just disappears completely.
He's just gone.
Yeah. There was no sort of farewell or anything, and it was just kind of, he's off.
I guess he got shipped out like we threatened. Like he's going to go captain a fleet now. Is that what he's doing?
He's going to come home and be like, oh shit, mom and dad are dead.
He's going to come home and be like, well, I guess I'm emperor now. I have all.
And that's something that might be a plot in season 2. You never know.
Exactly. Like maybe they took stuff out for season 2, maybe, or it just felt like something had been dropped. I don't know why I felt this way. I was trying to think about that in my second watch, but it felt like the last episode was disconnected somehow.
I don't know if they've reshuffled some of the other episodes as well, because there's we learned that Desmond is the new Bashar in episode 4 or something. But in the previous episode, the princess refers to him as the new Bashar.
Oh.
So it feels like they've moved bits around, perhaps. I don't know, but yeah, I suspect that if we ever got the original shooting scripts, that what we see on screen doesn't match those.
Like we did get a lot of the political intrigue and like the developer relationships, but like I think the show would have benefited from so much more time spent in that aspect. Definitely missed the days of like 20 episode seasons for fiction shows.
Remember?
But yet the Skeleton Crew is getting 8 episodes. And
well, Simon, it's Star Wars. They have their own special rules.
They have their own special Disney dollars also.
What is this? Yeah. Speaking of like expanding the universe of Dune, like Simon, we got face dancers here.
We did get face dancers, and I like that they introduced even just showing us a little bit of face dancers and Ixians and Tleilaxus saying those words, because if Dune Part 3, I have to keep saying Part 3 because Denise split Part 1 into 2 movies. Those are going to be crucial words that the average non-Dune fan is going to have to learn pretty fast, because Messiah talks a lot about those, and I like showing that technology or those kind of people have been around for a while, and it's not going to be like, oh, what's this? This isn't what I saw in the first two movies. So in a way, if people are watching the show, and I hope they are, they're hearing these words and they're going to start hearing them and recognizing them, because get ready for a lot of those words in Messiah, people. Especially like in the first 10, like the first 10, 15 minutes, like the first chapter of Messiah. Yeah. I wonder how they're going
This is
to.
when you put a banner above my head that says "Keep Dune Weird," right? Because I think we've talked about this on other episodes, but like there is a potential that Messiah will also be collapsed in terms of concept, right? And that will get, that will get that plot, but it won't involve any of that weird stuff. It'll just be like disillusioned Fremen and some like maybe a Carino. But it does make me hopeful that they're introducing all of the weird stuff in the show, presumably because it is something that they want to keep in the cinematic live action universe.
Well, you might have your keep doing weird. I have, and Denis I trust. So I believe Denis will show us a lot of that weirdness. And at least we're not getting God Emperor right now, right after, you know, part
But we're
two.
talking about him. We are talking.
We are, especially in this show. So that's one question. They keep talking about this threat that's coming. Do you think the Sisterhood has seen the God Emperor somehow?
I think that's too far ahead in terms of, the cinematic universe hasn't addressed that. So to try and introduce that before the film has, I think they're focusing more on the prequel books where it's the thinking machines that are the immediate threat. I'm sure they sort of left it very open and full of red herrings for Dune fans to obsess about sandworms and god emperors and all sorts of stuff, but I think they are focusing more on the immediate time frame.
So you think that mention of the tyrant could be any tyrant, any old tyrant?
Yeah, that might be a bit of fan service as well, but I think the threat to the Sisterhood that they are seeing at the moment is the thinking machines.
Hey, that's a
Also
real
very
threat
true.
right now.
First.
Yeah, it's like one of the big highlights for me was how the show really expanded on the rest of the Imperium, because of course in the movies it was really focused on Arrakis. We got like some shots of Caladan in the first movie, some shots of Git Prime. But even the Imperial world, we only got to see indoors. On this world, we got to see like sweeping shots of like the cities, like the different planets, like how people were living on those planets, which was quite interesting. So I was seeing the houses like it almost in poverty situations at this time in history. But yeah, that definitely made the universe feel larger, and I think that's something that the show in some ways did better than the movies, and making me feel like, okay, it really is a universe of a million worlds, and you're getting to see the launch rod and everything else. And although the show was focusing primarily on the Sisterhood, we got to see a hint of the other factions. Like Rachel, what did you think about it?
Well, okay, so we know that that's a big pet peeve of mine, right? How does the economy of Dune work? And if we don't ever mention money or transportation, it all falls apart. So I love that the other kind of schools, the other planets are looming large in the show, even if they're not explicitly part of the narrative. We did get a mention of Mentats, but we got mention of Ixians. We've got the allusions to the Thylaxu because of the face dancer, which honestly, I jumped up off of my sofa when the face dancer appeared. I was like running around my living room. But like, even we got to see the Landsred meet. I mean, these are all things that I obsess over of, who's making these decisions. And to go back to the point of stagnation, like we are looking at the economy of the universe. We do see houses that maybe are much more poor than we thought they would be because they don't have access to ships, without having to pay a huge amount of money for it. Not everybody is dealing in spice. We've got whale fur and all that stuff, which yes, kind of falls under fan service, but I think is important detail to making a universe that feels rich and layered and that it works. So I loved that. I loved every shot we got of a highliner. They were so beautiful. So I really like that it's there, right? Maybe not on the page. Maybe they're not sitting in a room talking to a navigator, but we know that this rebellion exists, and obviously they're being used by multiple factions, right? Like the Sisterhood are using them to kind of advance their own plans. But then how are they getting around? How are these smugglers, moving from one planet to the next? Those are the unseen hands that are mentioned, that are these other schools that we're hopefully going to see in season 2. I don't know. I love it. I love that it's all there, even if they couldn't afford to show us.
In season 2, I want to see the Landsrad discuss taxation of trade routes.
I want to.
One episode just on that.
Yeah, exactly.
I want charts with little graphs.
Yeah,
I like seeing the Landsrad. I have to say, like, it's not really focused on in the original for obvious reasons, and you do have to be careful showing those kinds of scenes because you could definitely get too far into the weeds, and we know other examples of this in the sci-fi universe that maybe just can't really hold their own of interest. But seeing like the women file in with the men, I really that's one of my favorite scenes. It's just kind of this sense of who's in charge here, where's the power lie, and watching the kind of the emperor trying to jockey for power with other houses, and then then Desmond kind of the wild card thrown into the third. I like seeing the Landsrad just for like a little bit. It's just
every house duke having a sister next to him. It just showed us, it's working. They've got their hands everywhere.
What's that line that we saw in the trailer? I'm just here to have a house full of girls, or we're not doing anything wrong. I forgot what the
I'm just
tagline.
teaching a school of girls.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's going. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I love the inside baseball part, like you were talking about, Rachel. Like, I want to see the Trump company like show up one day, even if I see just someone wearing like a Trump with
Got a
like
contract
initial
signing.
initial there, just so like how people collect money. Like, you always see those like security guards go into like stores and empty out the till. I just want to see someone like that.
A little armored van.
just in a background shot. Like, don't even mention it. It's just a background shot.
I don't care if that is fan service. I will be the first one to be like, thank you.
This type of fan service, I think, that works because it's not interruptive, right? It's not something that impacts a normal person watching the show. It's just like a little detail that if you know about it, you're like, I know what that is. That's cool. And it makes you feel like they paid attention, that they read the source material when they were doing the adaptation, which is nice.
And it's also showing a world that's lived in, not just like, yes, stuff like this does happen. There are taxes, there are banks, there are, everything. When I was a kid, I had my little bank in Lego City, and, my little guy would go around collecting from different like little food places. My little Lego guy. So yes, it makes sense.
Were those taxes he was collecting, Simon, or something else?
He was collecting bricks.
Well, that is a nice storefront you got here. Shame if anything were to happen to it.
Yeah.
We're upping the spice bribe.
We've been talking about for all the characters in the show, like the shades of gray and different questionable morality of the different factions, and we see that in the Sisterhood as well. Of course, they have the belief that they're doing what's right for the Imperium in the long term, but they're not hesitating to play God or like eliminate their enemies. But I thought it was interesting the point that you brought up in your written reviews, Kara, about like how the show really leaned into the horror aspect of the Bene Gesserit, which is interesting because we hear about the other memory and the agony, but I think this is the first time on this series where we really see like how terrifying some of those things can be. Like, how did you feel about the way that the show sort of approached that aspect?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of horror. I like a little bit of horror. Like I really like the Alien series, the films. But I just was noticing that they seem to be liking to blend those elements in. I think for probably to build up more dramatic conflict. So there were lots of different. Some of them were more overt, like the world that Lila goes into during the Spice Agony felt very horror like haunted, like the other memory kind of ghost like haunting her. And then they eventually do haunt her. So the idea of possession wasn't just Lila who was possessed. We also have Desmond is he kind of goes into that like possessed mode when he's burning people. And then there's all the nightmares that the acolytes have. And so these are kind of horror elements about not being able to control yourself or not being able to be in charge, or the loss of innocence. And then the body swaps or the masking, I also thought was an interesting theme, like the face dancer. Kind of remind me of a werewolf, like when she's like transforming, which is, I guess, more fantasy than horror. And then a lot of psychological horror. So the concept of fear taking over your mind. And so it's not so much an external threat as a psychological threat. And then a lot of horror will have like a twist kind of, and we saw that with, finding out who Desmond is was a kind of, interesting twist that, I wouldn't say sci-fi normally always has a twist in it. And then Desmond, we could see him as a kind of monster other figure. And so on the surface, he seems very anti-machine, like, oh, we need to get rid of that little cool lizard robot. We need to stomp out all the machines. And then it's ironic because he's actually a sort of unnatural human who's been tampered with. And so I'm assuming we'll learn more in season 2 about how much has he actually been maybe corrupted by machines himself, even though he's so vocally against them. So I think they used horror elements pretty well to build up the dramatic conflict and to add another layer to the story. So it wasn't just political intrigue. There was something there kind of probably more for your everyday viewer who's not so much into the Dune lore, that they could kind of enjoy and have that mystery element running throughout the series. What did other people think? Did you pick up on the horror element?
The end of episode 1 with little Pruitt Rechages getting incinerated. I was not expecting a child being burnt alive on my Dune scorecard for.
They didn't
this
hold
season.
back.
Well, that was quite something.
I didn't mind that stuff. I actually enjoyed it, but I'm also a big horror guy. So, and I've always said that Dune is like Star Wars for goth kids in a way. Like the Lineage of Fear. I mean, not the Lineage of Fear, the box. The first time you see it, especially, I think the visuals in the 84 movies are more terrifying than the one in the Villeneuve movie. And I was always intrigued by that. I was always intrigued that the Harkonnens, and especially the way Denis made them, feels kind of monsterish horror movie kind of feel to them. So I was totally okay with that. And yes, as I like to call him, I was going to call him Little Donald, but he died in the first episode, so I never got a chance to start that. But I was like, oh, you're going to burn a kid. Wow. Okay. That's how it's going to be. Okay. You are definitely an HBO show now.
Yeah, I think fear works really well in the Dune universe because we're always
It's the
talking
mind killer?
about. Well, literally, it is the mind killer, right? People's brains are like burning up in this show, but it's almost like the ultimate goal of Dune is to expand possibility, right? To reject like a prescriptive fate. But that is the fear of the unknown, right? So you have that like tension, that dichotomy between characters that are striving with everything they have to kind of lock in a path, to lock in an outcome because of that fear. And then you have other characters who are like, actually, no, that's bad. Like we need chaos to rule. And it becomes visceral when you have all like you said, like the pain box is like, put your hand in the box. You don't know what's going to happen, and I'm not going to tell you, right? And so it connects you to the actual body versus the like, I don't know, like the the fear of the unknown. I don't know. I think I liked it. I thought it was effective. I was very aware of the trope that, women in power are scary. And I didn't want to, I felt sometimes the show gave into that a little bit too much, where it was like, women be crazy, women with power are never a good idea. But I think that they tried to balance it with a lot of these male characters in power were basically like impotent in power, right? They were easily controlled. So it worked sometimes, and sometimes I felt like, oh, this is a little, what I would expect. Um, but yeah, I loved the visuals of it. I thought that especially the possession stuff. I wonder if we'll see something similar if we get that in the films.
So my question is, by the end of season 2, are we officially going to get the Litany of Fear? Because it felt like we were getting so close of one of them, like, starting to repeat it. And I'm like, oh, just do it. So season 2, I predict it ends with the Litany of Fear.
Well, I mean, that was part of my criticism of the show, really, is that it feels like it has to establish everything that we know about the Sisterhood within, a series. So we've already got truthsayers, we've already got, converting poisons. We almost got the Litany Against Fear. We've got the Gon Jabbar we saw in the last episode as well. So I've mentioned this before about prequels. You've got Indiana Jones 3, where in the first 10 minutes, Indy gets, his hat, his whip, his scar on his chin, and his fear of snakes. Nothing ever exciting happened to Indy in the next 30 years. It's all established in those first 10 minutes. And likewise in this, it feels, the breeding program is already in place. What has the Sisterhood been doing for 10,000 years? They've not developed any new skills or techniques. They're already doing the prior Bindu training. And I understand, the fan service or the need to, or the feel of the want to incorporate all this mythology in the series. But that, as I've said before, I have problems with prequels where they just feel the need to establish everything that happened right up front.
Because that's what people want, sadly.
I think the voice OP, though, like they shouldn't have that right away.
Yeah, it's just leave something for season 2 or season 3 or the next 10,000 years,
Season 2 is just 3,000 years later. It's a completely new cast.
That would never work in the book. What you want about? I'm some crazy 3,500 years.
Can't do that.
I think I had to set aside the fact that it was supposed to be 10,000 years because it didn't feel like that to me. It felt a lot closer in time. So I was just like, okay, I'll just park that because I know why they're doing it. But yeah, you're right. What has changed? Because even with Stagnation, it's kind of a hard sell to say that many years. I mean, look how much in the real world we've changed within 2,000 years.
And part of this is, I guess, because it's based on the prequel books by Brian Herbert and Kevin Jansen, and they establish a lot of these, the voice and all of the Sisterhood stuff is kind of established. That they've did that pretty much out the gate in a couple of generations. So I'd just like to know what the Sisterhood has been doing for 10,000 years.
Well, I have a theory on that about the end of the show. Can I talk about that, or do you want me to save that for later?
Yeah, maybe we'll for the last bit.
See, I'm teasing you people. Gotta watch the whole show.
And I do think that's a valid criticism about it looking very similar to the movies, and because it really 10,000 years. On one aspect, I think it is that they do really want to have that connection with the movies, make it seem familiar. But I do think it's intentional in the sense of showing the stagnation and how the humanity is now focusing on developing humanity, like the human skills. We've seen the Sisterhood in this series, and hopefully we'll see the navigators, the mentats, and so on in the next seasons as well. But to me, it actually does make sense from a certain perspective that like technology and that sort of aspect just stops developing. We've seen that basically in the setting of the show, like they've come off the war with the thinking machines. So there they have a huge advancement in technology in a short period of time. The show even says that we're in a time of relative peace and things have not changed, but it's developing, and that's the focus there. And I think that's has some parallels to like our life today. Just 20, 30 years ago, like when computers were just coming out and when the internet was just coming out, you could be having an impression that technology is just going to grow exponentially. Every year, things are going to be like double the speed or four times more powerful or whatever. And that held true for a number of years. But if you look at the past years, that's clearly not the case anymore. We're already seeing diminishing returns in our society today. Just look at the latest version of the flagship smartphone. The difference between this year's model and last year's model is getting increasingly less. And in some cases, people would argue like that our phones have less functionalities than they did before. So we're clearly seeing this diminishing returns. And in an Imperium where people don't have free transportation across different worlds. So you have to get on a highliner, and that's like a monopoly. So that's a different aspect. What if this monopoly is controlling things for 10,000 years? Again, you're going to see stagnation. We've seen that in our society today. I think it's a mix of both. Like they try to do this connected to films, but I think it also is intentional that they want to show that there hasn't been that much investment.
I agree with that with the technology, particularly with like no thinking machines. But when the Sisterhood is designed to expand the capabilities of what a human is, for them to suddenly is like, we've exhausted all possible human abilities in a couple of generations and there's nothing else left to develop. That's where I feel, cramming everything into a prequel and leaving nothing to develop over the next couple of thousand years. That's where I have a problem with it.
Yeah, like certainly like we saw like House Rachese and mention of the Ixians, like that must be because of that diminishing return. Like that's why they kind of shift over to developing things technologically hidden, right? Like that's why we're going into like biology and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces of tech. But I think you're correct. Like how do these schools of thought, right? How do these the mind-driven technologies, why did they need 10,000 years? I wonder if like that's why maybe Desmond is like a crucial stepping stone for the Sisterhood, because he's seemingly immune to the voice, right? This is like their one major power that they definitely can use, and he's immune to it. If he teaches other people or is representative of a type of being that is not, susceptible to the voice, maybe they're like, oh, we got to develop all this other stuff that lets us control people if there are people who can be immune to this one thing that we've got. I don't know. It's certainly like everything seems proto, right? It's like it's proto Prana Bindu. It's proto voice. It's proto Kwisatz Haderach. But yeah, 10,000 years. Do they need that much time? Could they do it in 5?
I had a really hard time with the 10,000 years. Like, also in my head, I was like, oh yeah, 10,000 years, not 100 years, not 500 years. It felt, and like I forgot who said it on the show, I understand why. And especially when I get to my theory about something in season 2, I just felt like you could do so much in 10,000 years. Like, I thought it was going to be more prehistoric, kind of like talking Fred Flintstone prehistoric time, but like not so advanced. And I mean, I get that they just fought the war. I understand all that, but I thought it was going to be less evolved than it was.
Yeah. I don't know. Even when Valia says, I forget who she was talking to in this conversation, probably Tula, but she multiple times she's like, oh, the prophecy is here. The prophecy is now. Mother Raquela's prophecy. I'm like, it's been 30 years. You really think that like it only took 30 years for this mega prophecy to come? Like, especially when we know it actually takes 10,000 years. It's funny that she thinks that she's so important, but she's the main character of the universe, right? That it's going to be her that has.
But there's so many people like that even in our world. That's like that. That's like, it's here. It's finally here. Like, No.
Like Y2K. I mean,
Oh my
huge
God.
deal. And then it's like, yeah, people always looking to the next thing. I mean, a lot of religious movements are also based on that apocalyptic kind of, the end times, and that's
And
the,
it's always next year. Yeah.
yeah, or that's because if you want to create urgency, you need some kind of deadline. Otherwise, like people have a hard time thinking long term. So you think like, oh, I mean, just think about like in our health, like if you're thinking about, oh, this might harm you in 30 years, it's hard to get people to, think that far ahead. Whereas it's like if you have an immediate reaction to something, it's a lot easier to think, oh, I'm never have that again.
Yeah. By the
So in
way, I
that way,
love.
the stagnation feels engineered, right? It's not just because it's economically viable to just keep everything status quo forever so that the Landsrat and Cho make as much money as they can with zero growth. But it feels like there are definitely things at work to keep it like this for another reason. Maybe we'll get into that for season 2, at least from the Sisterhood's perspective.
By the way, I love that there's a whole generation that doesn't know about Y2K. You got to think about it. Like an 18-year-old out there
Yes,
does
they
not
don't.
know,
Well, they can Google it, I guess.
or they can watch the horror movie Y2K. That came out like I think on like around Christmas. But yeah, and if it wasn't Y2K, wasn't it like 2012 that everything was supposed to end?
Oh,
And
right.
then,
The Mayan calendar one.
yeah, so it's here. It's always here.
Well, I mean, Herbert did think that every society would eventually go back to feudalism. So in that sense, maybe you could say that maybe it moves ahead and then it goes back and it's just kind of cyclical. And so we're seeing it in the growth phase, and then it'll go, kind of look at a step back and have to relearn, or maybe they'll have a, library burned down or something and then have a loss of knowledge. But you kind of have to jump through some hoops to justify 10,000.
Yeah.
That's a big number.
Just makes it seem
One
sci-fi.
thing easy to forget is that the time when the show is set is 10,000 years after, like, I guess, our present day. So like humanity has had, that huge expansion. They've gone to the stars. They've like colonized all these worlds. They like build enormous cities like across thousands of worlds. And then they've reached the pinnacle of civilization. They've recovered from the thinking machines. And then I guess that's at least the intention. Seems that, okay, from that point on, they're like sort of regressing almost in a way to the feudalism society where things are controlled. As mentioned, if you're not having free interaction between all these remote worlds, it does make sense in a way. But yeah,
Yeah. The Empress is that faction, right? Like her family is the one, she comes from the Butlers, right? So she's the one that kind of represents those like super fanatical religious people that are like, no machines, none, no calculators, nothing. So, and she seems to be very ambitious. Seems to want her spot.
looking ahead to season 2, one of the things that I'd talked about when we were anticipating the show is how I actually like hoped that we wouldn't see too much of Arrakis in this first season, that they would leave that for later, because there's just so much more to explore. It's a huge universe. Why only focus on one planet? But then we do have that really important shot at the end when Vi Harkonnen lands on Arrakis. So, San, what were your thoughts, like theories around that?
All right, so let me put on my tinfoil hat. So this is when they start the propagation, the hype of the Lisan Agaid. That gives them that much time, the 10,000 years before Paul's, journey to Arrakis. And maybe that's where I'm thinking the Sisterhood splits up in different group. And this is the Lisan Agaid group that uses Arrakis, uses the Fremens to warn them that something is coming. That's where I think that starts the propaganda of that from the Sisterhood. I could be totally wrong. Like I said, I had my tinfoil hat on. That's what
I support you.
And
I support you.
like at first I was like, really? You're gonna land on Arrakis? And as I was falling asleep, I was like,
It's the Tatooine problem, right? Where it's like, well,
yeah.
it's the planet we all want to go to. I think you're right. I just don't know which sister is going to be the one that is like the first Reverend Mother that like becomes part of that Fremen lineage of Reverend Mothers that we see in Dune. I can't predict who that's going to be yet.
So maybe season 2 is we get someone that starts doing that. And if there is a season 3, thinking way ahead, maybe we get to see that first Reverend Mother really become part of the Fremens.
I think season 2 will just want to capitalize on the listen our guy meme. That's all it'll just be still on. Yeah.
I still use it sometimes. I randomly go when something happens around the house. I'm like, listen to the
Still can't believe that that's become a meme.
I love it.
30 years ago, there wasn't an internet 30 years ago, really, but
I know.
still people will be going around quoting "Listen, our guy." In
Go back and tell 14-year-old me.
Right? Hey, by the way, the other day,
Needs
you
to
guys
have-
will get. I think you guys will get a good laugh out of this. I was talking to my therapist. She's like, "How's your week going?" I'm like, "Oh, I went to go see the Bob Dylan movie." She's like, "Oh, with that guy, Timothy." She's like, "I can't say it." I'm like, "Timothy Chalamet." She's like, "I don't like him." I'm like, "Wow, really? You offended me. He's part of my favorite franchise of all time." She's like, "You like Dune?" I'm like, "I love Dune." I show her, my D tattoo, and I'm like, "I do a Dune podcast." Blah blah blah. I get like super excited. She's like, "Yeah, you would like Dune." Now that I think about it, I'm like, "Was that an insult?"
Isn't that how you introduce yourself, Simon? I'm surprised it went
Yeah.
that long before.
Yeah,
It's
one
like your
couple
middle name.
times. No, that's Mark, but mine is. Hey,
I have a business card, it's like American Psycho.
no, hey. People might not know this out there in the internet land. My old Best Buy name tag, you can't see it unfortunately, says Muad'Dib. It never said Simon, it said Muad'Dib.
What?
No.
And either people are like, "Oh, I don't get it," or they're like, "Hey, Paul, how's it going?" And I'm like, "It's Muad'Dib now." So it was like half and half. But people at work were like, "Huh?" I'm like, "You'll see. One day you'll understand."
I have the
Like,
litany on my arm. So I'll be
Nice.
on the subway with my arm up and people will be like, "What does that say?" And I'm like, "Don't ask me about this. You'll never ever leave the train." Blathering at you for an hour.
I think your theory is perfectly plausible considering the name of the show, right? It's Dune Prophecy. So are they really going to connect to the prophecy 10,000 years later? Let's see. It could be that they're really going for that, thinking ahead to the Dune Messiah movie. Do they really want to have this show connect directly to that, depending on how they position the second season? Is this going to come out before that movie? Is it going to come out after? I think there could be some interesting ways that they approach it. So
does anyone know when production starts on season 2?
I don't think they've announced it yet. I would suspect this year and maybe comes out next year, but I suspect we've probably got a good couple of years before it comes.
Yeah, we seem to wait longer between seasons now, and that's kind of normal.
Going back to when it was 22 episodes every year, and now it's 6 episodes every 2 years. Nothing can possibly go wrong.
Nothing.
There's no AI issue here to see. Move along.
Yeah, just ask ChatGPT to generate 6 season 2 scripts and then generate.
And then Frank just spins in his brain.
I feel like actually this show might be more relevant now than if it had been made even just a few years ago, because AI is on everybody's lips, or not everybody, but a lot of people, and it's in the public consciousness. So I like seeing that part of the show. The things they were saying, I feel like you could apply to the modern day. So I hope people found that relatable and interesting.
Oh yeah, Dune is always shockingly relevant for the time, and it has been so forever. You can't make it obsolete. It's still going.
I forgot who I was talking to about AI. I was like, well, Frank Herbert predicted this. Maybe you should have read Dune.
Although I haven't thought a lot about season 2. I was just glad that it got greenlit because I wasn't sure. It was exciting to see them land on Arrakis, but at the same time, I don't want everything to just have to be about Arrakis, because it is nice to see the rest of the universe and explore different areas. And I feel like as soon as we're on Arrakis, I'm gonna, my consciousness is going to be raised about what they're doing that's maybe not so much in line with the original series. I think this was more enjoyable for me because it wasn't on Arrakis. But of course, seeing more sandworms would always be great. And maybe talking a little bit more about spice, which wasn't actually dwelt on very much in the films, going into maybe some of the economic aspect, maybe looking at some smugglers. But I would really be interested to see how Valia maneuvers, if that become kind of a base for her, or in that the Fremen woman who's also a sister and struggling with her loyalties. I was interested in her character and what she's going to do. So just seeing the characters develop is what I'm most interested in. Doesn't really matter the location for me so much.
Yeah, for me, I'm hopeful that season 2 sort of puts behind all the problems that season 1 had over its 5-year development and can sort of hit the ground running and explore other aspects of the Dune universe. That the movies are short time frames, so Denny has excluded Mentats and the Guild and all the fan favorites. So as people have said on this podcast earlier, I want the weirdness back in Dune. So I want weird guilds. I want to see Mentats doing bizarre calculations. I want to see more of the Landsrad and people eating whale meat and furry coats. And I want to see what Harrow Harkonnen is doing, because he was one of my favorite characters in the season. He was very sort of weird. He was perhaps one of the weirdest characters, and he's got that little recording of Valia and all her plans to assassinate the Emperor. What's he going to do with that? Is he going to go for the Sisterhood? Is he going to go with Desmond? Is he going to start something on his own? So, yeah, more Harrow Harkonnen for season 2, please.
Yeah, agreed. I want to see all the same things that you said. Obviously, I want to see my buddies in the guild make a little bit of an appearance. Shout out to the scene where we put people in a box full of spice and almost turned them into a navigator. Maybe that was awesome. More of that. I also just want to see the development of, and I don't know. I love the fan service. I would like more. I want more Cymex stuff. I want more nanobots in a weird way. Like, if we're going to be doing like nanobot viruses, like, let's go. Like, make me hate a robot. I'm down for that. And I also, want to see more about the rebellion and what their motivations are.
Well, I want to see what everyone said, and I agree. I don't want it to be all about Arrakis. I want to see space navigators. I want to see the weirdness. I want to see that little recording. I totally forgot. He has that little recording. So what is he going to do with it? Is he going to keep it to himself for maybe 20 years down the line, use it as blackmail? Or is it something that he's going to go? Also, Constantine, where are you, buddy? Are you still up in space, just hanging out? Are you going to come back down to like refuel or something eventually? See what happened to your house? Sometimes the unknown is the best, but I do want to see that little subplot on Arrakis starting to build. I want to see Lisa Nagaid status in my Dune, but I agree with Rachel. Keep it weird. Mark, you're right. And especially, I think they're doing a great job at that right now for setting up Messiah for the average Joe Schmo that's just like, oh, let's go see Dune Part 3. And that are not Dune fanatics like us here. I would love to know what Marcus would like to see in season 2.
Yeah, hopefully that we don't have any production issues now, that they're really focused on the vision for this show, like connecting to the movies or not. I would really love to see them double down on exploring the political intrigue, the interaction between the different houses, different factions, exploring the development of humans. In addition to the sister, as we mentioned, the Mentats, how are they being utilized by the different houses? Because we hopefully should see some hints of how Mentats are being used in lieu of the technology. The navigators, I want to see how that restriction of not being able to travel freely between planets, it all has to be done through the guild. How does that impact society? And have more time to explore the character relationships. Even with the main characters, Valia and Tula, I thought it was really intriguing how they don't have that 100% trust with each other. There's that conflict within them. Is that going to result in a rift in the sisterhood, as we've talked about? So I just think that there's so much possibilities, and I think if they're able to approach the second season with a really clear vision of where they want to take the show, hopefully among multiple more seasons, it's going to be really cool. Okay, so to close off, so we've had one season of Dune Prophecy, 6 episodes. I want to hear everybody's final star rating.
Okay, so I guess I'll go first. I think my rating would be 3.5 out of 5. There were certainly lots I enjoyed in it. There were certainly some bits that I wouldn't say disliked, but wasn't too keen on. Some of the writing was a bit clunky. Some of the pacing and the position of the flashbacks. But overall, it's great to see Dune on TV again, and I'm excited for whatever season 2 brings.
I will go next. I'm also going to give it like a 3-ish stars out of 5. I agree with you, Mark, that I feel like some of the pacing wasn't as great. Like maybe there was some like re-editing, but I still thought that the cast was fantastic. Obviously, I love the costumes. I love all of the concepts that they wedged in there for us, and I appreciate that they honored the source material in the way that they did. But I would love a little bit more character development, a little bit more teasing out of character motivations and plot-wise.
I guess I'll go next to be the third person in line, and I will also give it 3 out of 5. I wish they would have spent a little bit more time with character development. It was a fun show. I wasn't totally blown away by it. I think that's what it was. And to quote another HBO show, Mr. Larry David himself, it was pretty good. It's worth checking out.
I mean, I probably would, I'd go with Mark with the 3.5. Mostly because I really liked Malia and Tula, and I really like seeing the Sisterhood on screen, even though I didn't agree with all of the choices made and showing the elements that would later become part of the Bene Gesserit. Just having a television show and to show them and having them dressed in all black and how they held themselves, I really like that part of it. So even though other things like the princess plot and some of those other things kind of didn't quite do anything for me, there was enough there that I really enjoyed. And having the twists and having the relationships and the family drama, I really like those parts. But I would probably like less generic sci-fi elements in the future. Really, if you're going to make something Dune, like really make it Dune. And I know it's hard to differentiate from what's gone before because we have decades of good sci-fi and fantasy coming before, but I would really like to see it take some risks and lean into what makes Dune special and unique. And that way it can set itself apart more from other shows that it's competing with.
I'm going to go with 3.5 stars in the end, which based on our rank system, it's good. So I think that there are a lot of valid criticisms for the show. And I think hopefully part of it was with the production issues, and they'll have an opportunity to address those. And I do think that there are some valid concerns with that a lot of fans have brought up in terms of like how this connects to the lore. So hopefully that's an area that improves. But yeah, just looking from the broader picture of other adaptations that have come out recently, I think that Dune Prophecy has delivered a lot of about what we hope to see from Dune. And I think it's been less concerning than some of the other adaptations that have come out recently. So yeah, I'm positive. It's good, a lot of room for improvement. So with that said, that's our show for this week. And we hope that you can support us by subscribing on the YouTube channel or on our favorite podcast network, and look out for more Dune Talk, as well as potentially some more of the Sisterhood podcast coming soon. For now, let's go ahead and sign off.
Hey, Simon Dowdy here. You can follow me on all the socials at sdowdy, and I'm excited to talk about Dune. Dune Messiah is going to be in production later this year, so we'll be covering that. And also Prophecy will hopefully pick up soon again. So good talking to everyone. It's been a while. I think the wife is tired of me talking to myself about Dune and just telling her stories about Dune. She's like, cool. Why don't you go talk to your friends?
Hi, everybody. I was Rachel. You can find me on Instagram at Darth_Rachel. You can also find me covering the books of Robin Hobb on a podcast called Bookkeep Radio. I am always here to talk Dune with you, Simon. I need that because I also need people in my life to talk to about Dune with. But yeah, see you next time.
Well, from Dune Info here, you can follow me on all the socials. It was great to be back and getting to talk Dune with you all. So thanks very much for indulging me an hour and a half or so. Looking forward to this year with hopefully news about Dune Messiah and season 2 of Prophecy and any other films or TV shows or games or computer games or books or toys or Lego or anything else Dune that's got Dune stamped on it.
Hey everyone, I'm Carrie Kennedy. You can find me at dunescholar.com and all the socials at Dune Scholar. And I'm really excited to have a TV show out about Dune with Prophecy and keep talking and thinking about more. And I definitely think it's worth another watch to go back through and see all the foreshadowing and all the different pieces as they come together. So thanks for having me.
This was Marcus Gabriel. You can find me at dunewsnet.com and at Marcus's writing on social media, including X. But yeah, it's been great being with you all, and yeah, look forward to more Dune Talk.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.